Rough estimate of when I started having real doubts was in April of 2019, around my 21st birthday. Now, only the surface of the thought would come, and then a really sick, sinking feeling in my entire torso, not just my stomach, but my entire torso, would overtake me. It was the most terrifying, I don't know, it wouldn't bother me throughout my day so much, but it would come when I was lying in bed as I was going to sleep, that kind of thing. Alone with your thoughts, that kind of thing. And accompanied with that feeling was feelings of like being incomplete. That was really big, and that I would never be complete because I've already done everything that I set out to do, and yet I still feel this dissonance. And the dissonance was actually more apparent than the dissonance that I felt before my initial transition. And that was deeply, deeply concerning to me, because transition is supposed to correct that initial dissonance. I don't want to call it dysphoria, but I mean, you could think about it that way. But it was deeper in a way. I hated my body now, not because of how it looked necessarily, not because it looked female, but because I knew that if I had left it untouched, I wouldn't now feel so incoherent and irreconcilable after my transition. And it wasn't a man's body, you know. I mean, no matter how many well-meaning people tried to curb my insecurity by telling me that I am just as much a man as any cis man, I knew that it wasn't true. But I realized if I had actually gotten there, and if I looked in the mirror and was indistinguishable from a cis man, I would also have been indistinguishable from myself, and would have felt as, if not even more, empty. I remember trying so hard for about a year to gain mass so that I could feel more complete. And that was like the step for me after top surgery. You know, get rid of the breasts, now actually start building mass so that you can take off your shirt without feeling like your appearance was deeply jarring to people. But as soon as I realized that was a lost cause, because I don't eat enough and my body type isn't made for that, you know, no gains. So I soon realized that that wasn't going to happen. I didn't feel regret throughout the process, like in the first 3 years, because in the first 3-4 years I was working towards something. And maybe I just didn't entertain the feelings of regret, because when one step ended, I would immediately start thinking about the next step. And when my voice started to change, I was elated. When I got top surgery, I was elated. And so naturally, because I was elated after each step, I thought, you know, that meant that I was going in the right direction. But when it was finished, I was left incomplete, broken. That's how I felt. I'm not saying that trans people are all incomplete and broken. I'm just saying that's how I felt, okay? I wasn't going to say stuff like, oh, I've mutilated myself, I've damaged myself. I try to avoid that language. I don't think it's productive. I mean, I couldn't think that. I was already having these doubts, and it was so agonizing already. You know, I mean, I was suicidal because I only had two options. I was either going to live with the regret and just kind of perform the rest of my transition, just kind of take on the performance as male and deal with it, or try to reverse it. From around, okay, we'll go over this part fairly briefly, why'd I transition in the first place. Basically, all of the basic features of my experience, a lot of what I was feeling about wanting to be a boy, lined up with the narrative of the 2015 sort of trans explosion. And I had verbally stated that I wanted to be a boy since early childhood, and I never really grew out of it. There were two thoughts that really kind of sealed it for me, and I realized that they were both future-focused. One was that I've never felt comfortable being a girl, so why would I ever feel comfortable being a girl in the future? The second was that I truly could not imagine myself as a grown woman. I don't know why, I just couldn't. I could only see a grown man. But they were how I was rationalizing what I wanted to do with my transition. I didn't have physical dysphoria. What I was told to describe what I was feeling was social dysphoria. I didn't want to be a guy, I wanted to be seen by others as a guy. I wanted to express my felt masculinity to the extremist extent that I could and exercise anything feminine in me or about me. I realize now that I was trying to control the way other people saw me. And that's, you know, it was mostly about being able to have control over how people would perceive me. And I had every reason to be confident in this desire to transition because I thought I had a male soul, because that was the narrative. And I saw all these other trans men, all these handsome, buff Aidens and Elliots, and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be accepted and liked and celebrated the way that they were. You know, I know that that sounds very immature and attention-seeking, but I mean, there is an element that, you know, that's validly what I wanted. It was from a place of envy. I saw all these other people being received for who they were, intelligible to others, and it seemed to always work for these people. They would say, I'm so much happier now that I'm on T, now I can start my life, I can finally be myself. And I wanted to say those things and feel that way. You know, I'm a 4 Enneagram. I know in my farm video I said I was 5, but I'm actually a 4. And, you know, as a 4, to hear those things, you think, oh, so clearly this is what I need to do. This is the answer to all of my problems. Vanity was also involved. I was like, oh, I'm gonna be so cute. I'm gonna be this like artsy gay guy type, and that'll be my place in the world. And I was harder to categorize as a female because there were things about me that were masculine, because I dressed androgynously, and I was really insecure about people being confused about what my sexuality was. And I don't want people to be confused about who I am and what I am. And I imagine, you know, what if there's a guy that I'm attracted to thinking, oh, she looks like a lesbian, which now I see as silly. And, you know, like I wanted to wear a suit to prom, but I thought, oh, I can't do that because I'm a straight girl. And I had to become a boy if I wanted to dress like one, which again is exactly the antithesis of the philosophy of, you know, gender fluidity. And I didn't understand, like, why do trans people talk about blurring the lines between genders? I want them to be fixed so that I can put myself in a box and be intelligible to people. And I couldn't relate to the idea of, you know, wanting to blur the lines. At first I wasn't sure if I wanted to get top or bottom surgery, but then I wasn't passing, which was infuriating. And I would freak out if somebody were to misgender me, even if it was a stranger, because it meant that I was failing. Because the way I looked, the way I naturally was interpreted in a way different from how I wanted to be interpreted, in a way that would bring me daily pain. So I was like, well, clearly this is what dysphoria is, right? Clearly I need to go on T as soon as possible so I can finally be seen as who I am. And again, this is a who I am that I had control over. It was a who I am that was intelligible to others, that was seen, period. And I couldn't focus on anything else at the beginning. I had a great social life. I was friends with other trans people, and I felt like I could deeply relate to them. I was making videos about it. I think in part because I wanted to show people how serious I was about it. It was everything. It really was my whole identity, and I wanted to be validated for it. And I think there was a part of me also that wanted to be hated for it, weirdly enough. I wanted people to write awful things, to be viscerally disgusted. It was this really weird cathartic thing where it would really hurt to read it, but at the same time, it would feel good in a way. It was its own sort of validation. I could feel persecuted. I could feel seen. And I could know that I was something because people were reacting to me. But it was a me that wasn't really me, so I was protected. I was protecting myself with the trans label from them attacking my like integral soul, I guess. I mean, it's not deep, it's just YouTube comments, but I tend to make everything deep. And so it was as if I decided to put a poster in front of my face that said trans in big capital letters, and so when people would insult me, that was all they were insulting, the poster, not me, because they couldn't see me, not really. They just saw my transness and had a strong reaction to it. And my identity was still intelligible and meaningful. But again, it wasn't really me. So throughout all of this, I had this relentless desire to be seen, yet simultaneously this fear of it. I was terrified of someone knowing what I was really like, deep down. And so I made myself into someone only to be seen, created this facade, and protected my real self, whoever that was or is, with the promise of some distant future where I could be happier. And at this point in my life, I'm in late high school, and I was not interested in anything to do with God at all. That wasn't at least until the second half of my whole transition. Anyway, so that was my reasoning for transitioning in the first place. My parents didn't support me, but again, it was kind of like, I have that narrative of persecution. I mean, I was sad that they didn't support me. I was sad that I couldn't celebrate my milestones with them without having an argument. But again, it was like, it was so easy for me to just dismiss all of my parents', contentions with it as just, oh, they're just transphobic, they're old, they don't get it, they're from a different generation. It was so easy to dismiss any of their concerns with just, oh, the transphobia, shouldn't listen to them, they don't really know me, I'm 17, I do what I want. So, living with restrictions. And I realize now that I treated transitioning like it was a resurrection, right? I didn't understand how religious my motives were for transitioning. I wanted to be born again, but I wasn't willing yet to do it in Christ. I wanted to be in control, not to submit, to cede control. So I chose to worship my identity, to worship masculinity. But you see, in order to be born again, you need something higher than you to go to. You can't die to yourself and be born again without God. I was the determiner of my self-definition. I couldn't deal with the female part of me. I couldn't deal with myself as I was, as God made me. So I tried to erase, pretending I was moving towards something more authentic. But as I transitioned, it quickly became clear that that wasn't happening. And after I did, as I was starting to experience regrets, I became much better acquainted with the part of me that was essentially female. I realized that I am, in some ways, very essentially female. I enjoyed performing a male role, and maybe some people would say that that's all identity and gender really is. Maybe it is, but I don't think so. There's a part of me that feels deeper than that, a part of me that is God-given. And I finally realized, I think, that that part of me is female. How terribly I wanted to be a mother, how I imagined my future life, how I not wanted to be seen. And we need to be seen and loved for that, not for something else, even if it's more intelligible. And these were real desires. These are not culturally, like my wanting to be a mother and a wife are real desires and not culturally made tropes. That also means I have 3 months where I have to tell every single person in my life. And that's another big reason why I'm making this video. Not just to tell people familiar with me in a distant sense, but to explain it to my family and the people in my life. To be seen for once as who I am, not as who, for shallow, meaningless reasons, I would like to be.